You ready to get started? Let's kick things off here. I'll stop sharing my screen. I'm already recording, so mission accomplished here. I'm doing so far so good, Matt, as the host. I can't, once I get screen sharing and recording done, you know that I've accomplished the major two goals of this whole
mastered it all.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for joining us and be part of it. I know that you've been working with Joel for, I'll say the good part of a year, if not a little bit over a year now, really.
Yeah, at least a year. It's been a couple of years.
Originally, though, you were part of the Jumpstart group, right?
Yeah, back like 4 or 5 years ago. Yep.
And through that group, you go through a lot of topics, a lot of that involving finding your genius, positioning, and understanding the marketplace. But I do remember introducing some of what we're going to talk about today into that group, the factors method and the roll-up. Were you exposed to it as part of your Jumpstart group? I can't remember when it was, and if I introduced you to.
I want to say yes. The difference with when I did the Jumpstart group a few years back, I was with my former business partner, and we did it together, but we didn't do anything with it. And then he left the company, so I almost had to go through it again after the dust settled and then rebuild. So if it was part of that first one, I'm sure it was, but like I said, we didn't do anything with it. It was sort of like this very, oh yeah, this is a great little thing, and that was about it. So
yeah, some of my questioning there and curiosity is, when we're talking about the factors method, specifically meaning like how you look at the decisions your company makes and structuring those upfront in a very proactive way, and then acting out those decisions throughout the year by looking at a production system using the production roll-up, and cash flow, knowing that there's a timing part of cash and the pieces that are there. We talk about it all the time. We've introduced it. We've given it away for free. We've done everything we can to get some of these tools into folks' hands. And sometimes it doesn't stick. And it takes like a moment, like a need or a revelation or something that makes it go like, oh, wait, now I get it, what that tipping point is. So I know that you've been exposed to it. You've been around for many years and you've probably heard about it. But what was like the moment, what was the company like a year ago or whatever it was, 18 months ago when you first started doing this thing that made you say, hey, give me those tools again and let me see how this thing works?
I actually think you guys were doing one of these about it. And it was just dedicated to that. And there was something interesting about that. I was like, okay, I kind of like the way this is giving me a little bit of power, a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of control. Let's see what this is all about. And even still, I was a little skeptical because I remember being on with Joel afterwards, kind of going through it and be like, well, yeah, we've got something like this already, kind of. I don't know that. Yeah, sure, we'll play around with it. And I had just hired a producer at the time, and so it was kind of all perfectly aligned. And we started playing with it and putting in numbers and really understood the power of it. And it was like, that's when it clicked. And it probably took, after it clicked, it probably took 6 months to really make it an everyday part of the workflow. But now it is, without question, every day. It's part of the workflow. It's part of every bid, pitch, do-si-do. It's
yeah. Yeah, I think that what I've learned over the years, especially when I started first like discovering this and trying to implement it with companies, is a lot of us don't love the introduction of routine. So I say, hey, if you actually want to get healthier, you probably should go for a walk every morning. And everyone knows that answer. It's very simple, but it's actually waking up in the morning and going to do that walk is the hardest part. The starting of it is the hardest part. So to tell somebody, hey, I could probably double your profit if you just followed through with the routine, then people are like, oh, okay. One, they're skeptical, right? Like, yeah, probably not for me, because if I could have doubled my profit, I would have done it without you. It's probably one of the first thoughts people have. Right. It's like, yeah. But also like the idea of like, oh, a routine is the answer. I don't want that to be true.
No, well, so there's truth to it, yes, but there's also, I think everybody knows that about routine. I think the idea that it'll double your profits it's a nice thought, but that shouldn't be your goal. Like Joel never said that. You guys never said that. Nobody ever pitched that as, hey, if you do this, you'll double your profits. For me, it was just a realizing, like I said, a control. Like if I can now take projects and I can reverse engineer them through the rollup and know that I'm going to make money off of it, assuming the client goes with what I've said. If they don't go with what I've said, then I just still work backwards. You know, if I say, hey, we want to do this for 35, and they're like, well, we have 20, then I go through and I make 20 my new starting number, and I take everything else out from that. And I know that that I'm hitting my splits, and it sounds so simple and stupid, and it really is, but that's it. I mean, we run every project through the splits, and we see how it comes out. And if we feel it's a little bit high after running through that, we'll adjust it, and then we'll adjust the project accordingly, adjust the scope of it on our end, and it made a huge difference for us. Huge.
So let's back up and see if we can kind of explain the process to people that don't have a roll up and don't know what all these terms are, just so they get a sense of what the difference might be. Because you're right, there is something that is very basic about understanding, how money flows. And simply put, the system we have in place doesn't allow you to spend the same dollar twice. Like you don't, if you need it for one category, you don't get to spend it in the other category. And that one simple mechanism that you could have predetermined that is this thing that captures results, like in your case, more profit. But the method itself, let's try to explain it together. But like the method itself really is this idea that every company has two buckets of decisions that they make. Those that are directly related to a project and those that are indirectly related to a project. So your producer and all the responsibility your producer has those items that they're making decisions for every day. And those are expenses that producer's in charge of. And those are expenses that are directly related to a project. And then you as a business owner have these indirect responsibilities, rent, your salary, company benefits, whatever those items might be. What we do is we just ask somebody to take all those decisions and divide them up into those direct and indirect categories. And then from that, we can determine a percentage that should be allocated to the indirect items. And what's left over is dedicated to those direct items. And then we map it out for a person on a project. And we say, hey, if the client revenue is $100,000 and 45% of our expenses or 45% of all revenue cover our indirect expenses, then we're going to take out that 45% before the project starts. We'll give you 55% to produce the project, and don't spend over that money. Go.
Yeah.
And that keeps the kind of the project and the company on track. Now that concept itself, that's pretty simple to understand, but there is kind of a moment of revelation, isn't it? Of how those original kind of pieces fall together. What was your process like in discovering those direct and indirect expenses?
Well, it was understanding how I was doing it before and how it didn't actually make a lot of sense. It was like, oh, well, we have the rates for me and the other owner, and then we have rates for when we're on a project and when we're not on a project. And we just kind of threw all that in a bucket, and then we would add, a few extra hourly, dollars to it to cover the overhead, the indirects, right? And I was like, oh yeah, this looks not right. And when it was all said and done, we kept track of how much time we thought was put into it. And then we'd look at that compared to what we got from the client and be like, all right, yeah, this was a positive, cool. And we'd kind of move on. But there was no place to really track that and keep an eye on it. And so with having the way that the rollup is set up, is it allows us to have those two different buckets, the indirect and the direct, and to be able to be like, okay, yeah, so I can see now how much is going here. And then the way, and if you want to show it, like when you get to it, it's got this cool column that's like a, profit or not, and so you kind of can take all that and put them together and have this picture of how things look. And it's really simple, really powerful, but it gives you a snapshot of the health of the company and that quick. So
Yeah,
it's
in a
fine.
way, the way you were doing it originally, I'll stop sharing just for a second. I can walk through it together. But the way you're doing it originally is very project focused. So you're saying, hey, let's put all the burden on the project, and what we'll do is just add a few more dollars to our rate, knowing that we'll basically cover everything else.
Yeah.
So we'll produce the project, and when the project is done, there'll be some left over to take care of everything else. And that's really the trap that we walk into, is that the company really is getting second fiddle
Yeah.
to, and therefore the business owners get in second fiddle, and the business owners' goals, lifestyles, and objectives are getting third fiddle because it's getting the hand-me-downs after the company is paid.
Mhm.
So a lot of people are giving up too much or don't have visibility into those decisions to figure out how to protect where they want to go, what their future is, and why they even started the business to begin with. And if you don't have that visibility, it makes a difference. Here, I'll share the screen so that people can kind of get a grasp of what your roll-up might look like. This is just a template. This actually isn't Matt's roll-up. But simply put, here's the columns that we're looking at. Is just like, each row is a project, and those projects have a total. And then from the very beginning of the project, we take out this indirect portion of it. In this case, this company's splits are 50-50, 50%, 50%. So 50% is taken out to cover all of the company's needs and the business owner's needs. And then what's remaining is the other half of the project. And then what you're using is just project tabs, something like this probably,
Yep.
to track down all those expenses and determine, hey, from a $650 or $6,500 direct allocation, how well is my project going, and am I overspending beyond that limit? Clearly put, if you spend more than that allocation, you're eating into money you needed to run your business, capture profit, pay for your kids' college, whatever those things are that the rest of the money is supposed to take care of. So you're giving up your future by spending it on the current project. But here's the question I'm often asked, Matt. When, this looks so simple, right? Because I can just do it in math. But when given only 50% of the budget, or whatever that split is for you, right? Not 100% of the budget, do whatever you want to, and then give me some leftover at the end for the company. We're really saying, hey, you're only allowed for a certain portion of the budget. Did you find that limited your ability to produce projects, to get things done, or let the creative output? Did you feel like your value or your quality was compromised?
No, because we did some cool shit last year. So like, and funny enough, it seemed like we had more people on projects than we ever did before. So like, running it through that honestly allowed control. It allowed us to be able to allocate properly and be like, okay, you know what? We have this much money. We know that we can spend all of it if we need to.
Yeah,
And
100%. Every dollar allocated, you can spend
exactly.
one of them. Yeah.
And that's okay. And then we looking at designers and animator, whatever it was that we needed, like, okay, well, we can do this person that, there's 600, but maybe they'll do like 550. Well, you start to put that in, and you realize that there's a lot more money to be had on a project than maybe you previously thought.
Isn't that an interesting revelation? Like, it sounds like restriction when you first hear it. Oh, I'm only going to give you half of the budget. But what it is 100% permission to use all of it. If you don't have that visibility, you are constantly fighting yourself. You're always saying, could I do it for less? Could I do it for less? Could I do it for less? Because I don't know how much I need to run my business. I didn't determine that ahead of time. So I'm always holding back, thinking I'm stealing from myself. And here, when it's clear, like, you go like, well, if you go beyond the line, you're taking away from that area. But if you stay within those barriers, you can spend all of it. 100% permission granted, right?
Yeah. And sometimes it can be difficult when a client comes to you and says, here's the budget. Then you have to do your splits and then work within what may seem less than what's possible, right? Those are always a challenge. But if you have the opportunity to give a bid and be like, okay, well, we've been asked to give a bid. Okay, great. We know we're the only one. We know they're going to give us the project. They just need a number for their bookkeeping stuff and all this, whatever. So you go through and you put the numbers together, how much you think it's going to cost. add in a little bit extra because you never know, and then run that through the splits. And then you end up with a bigger number than you might have thought. You'd be like, oh, well, they were probably going to give us 40, but we run this through and it actually is 65. Let's see what happens. And the worst thing that they can say is, hey, can you come down a little bit? And then you work your numbers back. But we were able to do that on more than a few projects last year. And it made the world of difference to be able to have that freedom to bid, but then also run it through all of the roll up and the splits and be like, okay, this is going to work out well.
Yeah, that's smart. So sometimes I realize that, or when talking to business owner, I hear that the client is basically setting the budget, right? And when you put these splits in place, we're somewhat limiting the resources that we can dedicate to that project. And we have this sense of like, yeah, but could I do more? Is it possible for me to contribute more to that client if I didn't have this restriction of this 50% or whatever my split is? Don't I want to do that as a creative business owner? Don't I want to just give the client as much as possible? But I think the feedback there is like, well, the limit is coming from the client. They're the ones that determined what the budget was going to be. It's their limit. They only want what $13,000 will provide them. They don't want what $30,000 would provide them,
right,
or they give you 30 grand.
Yeah.
So it really is our job to work with their limitations.
Yeah. There's something else that I learned along the way about being an owner / a hands-on designer, creative director, whatever it was, is that I didn't have to bill a bunch of creative director hours for me to make money on the project, for me to get paid, right? So I was able to step back and act more like an owner and let my producer do what she's supposed to be doing and give my creative input in like a creative director who doesn't always have to be hands-on all the time. So like and then going through and figuring out like how those your splits, line up, and owner money versus overhead versus all of those things, like that if your job is to like just kind of lead the ship, let the producer do what she's going to do, work with the designers as needed, don't have to feel like you need to be in on every minute of it. It makes a huge difference. It allows that flexibility for you to step back and work on other things, work on this other bid, and know that you're still going to get money as an owner. So like that was a big shift for me too, to be able to like learn how to like put my roles in boxes a little bit better.
So, in the promo for this, and Joel said it's even better than what we were promoting, but we didn't want to say too much. But in the promo we said you basically you doubled your return over year, and Joel said it's actually more like tripled your return. So there's money that always existed, and somehow you were able to capture it when you were doing this. Can you explain where that money came from? Like where was it not before that now is in your savings account? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think some of it was putting those restrictions on, like some of it was really understanding how to be efficient with a project. We all think that we are, we all think that we're keeping track of it. Oh, we're getting out of the office early and whatnot. Well, being able to hire a couple of designers, animators who are going to just be dedicated to that for one day, instead of having to spend, like chunks of hours on it as, your own designer, your own animator, and by your own, I mean me, like, or the other owner, like you're not always as efficient because you're trying to wear a couple of different hats. So in doing that, it allowed us to free up that extra money, because it's like, oh, you know what? We can put this person on it at this rate, and he or she will go for 8 to 10 hours and won't be bothered about it.
Right.
Whereas me, like, or the other, other owner, other creative director, whoever it is, like, there's a couple different projects going on. You're answering emails, you're doing ownership stuff, you're doing creative director stuff. Like, you're never going to have those 8 to 10 hours to work on it.
Yeah, that's so smart too. It's this thought that dedicating something specifically within the time allotted, you get like focused on the real objective. You're really not wasting time with all the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. you can kind of focus on that limit and get done what needs to be get done.
Yeah.
There's also
I
a
was
subjective.
always I was always afraid of hiring more people because I was like,
Oh,
well, we
right.
can't afford that. Like, no, we don't need that. We can do this in house, or I can work on it, or you can design it, right? Well, it just doesn't always happen that way. So giving that, seeing it come out and seeing that it is a real thing, it opened up the world for me to be like, okay, how many people can we get on this to have really awesome results? Which is a whole different mindset than like, oh, and I need to do it.
Mm-hmm. Because they're no longer taking from you. Your portion of the money is already protected in the indirect categories.
Right.
So you don't have to, like, the company's taken care of. Now what best resources can I put forward onto this project for my client? Should I
Exactly.
add more? I can afford this person that usually costs more. I can bring them on for a limited time. There's a lot more freedom within now that category because the limit is very clear. Spend every single dollar that's in
Yeah.
there. I find that producers love this too because through this method, we give them all the responsibility and all of the authority. Where before you
Control.
give them all responsibility, but you have to run everything by me because you might be taking money that I need for something else.
Yeah.
And now you say, no, my money is protected. You can do whatever, 100% of what you want to over there. And the producer's mind goes to work. They become more resourceful. They're part of the problem solving. They understand limits. And I honestly feel like when there's a profit at the end and they can see it, they understand the reward too. So that's the cheese at the end of the maze that they're looking for and satisfaction. And when you don't give them that satisfaction, they're kind of running blind. They
Yeah.
don't really know what they're getting. They don't know if they're doing well. They might be in panic and they might not be very confident, but you can give them a lot of confidence. Like, no, look, here's the profits. All is good. You're making me
Yeah.
profitable over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
There's a technique here, and I don't know if you do this at Hugo, but I often with my clients ask them to update the roll up at least once a week, if not more frequently. And what I want them to do is, you know, I'll just say this, like a 5-week project. 3 weeks into that project, things have changed. There's new understanding of the process. There might be different rendering issues, software issues. And now that we know what's happened, I want them to recast that budget.
Mm-hmm.
Give me a new estimated cost to spend. And if I know that sooner than later, so if the project's taking a hit and I'm possibly going to be over budget, but I have 3 weeks left before the project delivers, there are other decisions I can make to pull back some of those items I was going to be loose on and still hit my budget.
Yeah.
And if you're not refreshing it and having that kind of critical thinking, I think every day is a little too much. You're basically having someone just go, update forms every day with no real review. But at least once a week, to have everyone really give me the latest estimate of what it's going to take to do a project. And I'll say this, give me the honest answer. If it's going to be negative,
Oh,
I want to know as soon as possible. I don't
yeah.
want to find out later it's negative, so that we can begin working together as a team, managing the resources, and possibly pull back from going over budget to being on budget by the time we deliver.
And that's where I'm more active in that role. Is I'm going in and looking at it too. So she's updating stuff, and then she's like, "Hey, take a look at this." So I'm going in. We talk about it together. I mean, it's very easy to be able to do that, and to even lend a hand, be like, "Hey, let's tweak this person around and move this and this," and she's like, "Oh, that works," or she's like, "We can't because we need to do this." So it is a collaborative effort, to be able to go through that. Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is where, like, I'm always the king of obvious, but I like to make sure everyone understands what they're saying when they say it. But I say, like, so the production's meeting is the producer's meeting, right? So don't, as a business owner, go into the production meeting and hijack it, turning it into a meeting for you, and you're running the agenda and you're asking all the questions. And it's really this idea of, like, I love the production meeting. I'm holding you producers accountable. Don't do that. Give the producers the floor and let them tell you what's happening with your projects. I want them to give me 3 bullet points for every project. How am I doing with my client relationship? So producer, tell me what's going on, what I need to know about my relationship with the client. What's going on with the budget? Am I over or under? Give me honest feedback. Tell me what I need to do to help improve that for you. And then how we're doing on the project creatively. Is there anything that we're hearing from the client or our staff that needs some effort? And it's your turn to listen to the producer talk to you, not you talk to them.
Yeah.
So you give them this tool, you give them all the authority, they create a report, let them report to you what's really happening. And
Yeah.
that's what you want, right? That's giving these business the business over to the right person at the right time. And then what you're experiencing is a little bit of like that freedom of like, oh, I don't
Well,
have to go home and panic now.
it's empowering for them too, and I think that that's really important. It gives them, like you said, gives them the power, it gives them the freedom, it gives them that sense that they're really part of this process. They're not just doing what you say, and I think that's important.
We have a couple of questions. I'm reading here. One, Jed is asking a good question that most people want to ask now too, is like, how do those splits work? How do you determine what's direct or indirect? And it takes a little bit of effort. You're kind of working things through. Some of those decisions create different behaviors. So if Matt, as a business owner, I turn you into a cost item for that producer is going to manage you through that project, right? Because you're a cost against their budget. If I take you, which is good or bad, if I take you out and put you into overhead, well, now they're no longer going to manage you. And they might ask more and more from you because you're not a cost item. So you're basically free and they get more and more. So each business owner should understand some of these cost related items and what behaviors are part of it. That one was a pretty easy one. But for me, like the simple line that I have is if the direct costs are directly related to the project, really everything the producer's in charge of, including themselves, should be included in those items. So that'd be all the resources you're going to use, the freelancers you have, any live action costs, whatever that stuff the producer's managing, you want there. And then anything the producer doesn't manage is an indirect cost. So that's what the business owner is going to manage. So obviously rent and benefits and taxes and whatever, those are all indirect costs to doing the job. And as I said before, freelancers and live action stuff. And then there's probably some nuance. Like I personally like to put commission as a direct cost, not an indirect cost. Meaning that, I mean, clearly if the project has a commission, then the project's burden is to pay that commission, not the overall business to pay those commissions. And those items. So each person probably has to answer that. You probably experienced some of that. Was there anything specifically that you noted in making that decisions that made one?
No, I mean, this is the kind of the beauty of, we're still small. So it's not like we had this massive list of overhead things. So it's really easy to determine what was what, and you're like, oh yeah, this is cool. It's pretty straightforward.
The other question is from Colin, and Jed did a follow-up too, is just the scale of this. Like, how does this work at any scale? I think scale can mean two things. One is I've worked with companies $20+ million that are using this exact same kind of method in their system. And we've, it's cleaning up this similar mess that you were talking about, Matt, as your company, like rates and rate cards, and how do I get all this stuff and different rules attached, right, with 100 so employees. And to just clean it all up so everything is very clear, it works, and it's project by project. So as long as you understand what your splits are, it works at any scale. It also works for live action, although there's an AICP bid and a industry tradition of what your markup's going to be. In some reality, should always be bill backs in a live action company, and it's controlling that bill back portion of it, so that you're not giving the client any more than they paid for, and you're keeping whatever investment returns you're looking for when you own your own equipment or have your own crew, or if you're the director. Those are the items that you would mess with a live action portion of it.
Yeah, we're actually doing one right now, and it's proving to be a little bit of a challenge, because the client is very particular. And what we don't want to get stuck, we don't want to get stuck at the end of it with them auditing it and being like, well, hey, what about this and this? We're like, well, this is their indirect, and this doesn't blah, blah, blah. And this is all, so we're trying to figure out, Jed, with the whole AICP thing, like how to really show all of this versus, well, maybe you don't show all of this, or is this go like you pad a little bit here for the director if the director's an in-house person, or, like trying to figure all that out while still being honest, because I don't want to run a dishonest company. So that one's, I don't know the answer to that one yet, as we're doing it right now. So
with some of our clients, what we do is, like I see Jane from Skycar was on here with her company, because she has live action and post, and sometimes live action post projects, that we've learned that the live action portion might have one split, and the post production has different splits. Really, the key to what we're trying to do is, by segmenting out indirect on a project by project basis, gives you an overall operating budget for your company. So you're really trying to finance your operating needs through those indirect costs. So no matter what that percentage is, and there's a lot of reasons to have percentages move up and down, but whatever that percentage is what's really your primary business requirements and needs. So if you need more money personally to run your business, it has to come away from the project. So you have to reduce that percentage on the direct side to get the money into your indirect pocket. And that's what you're working with. And then there's a subjective nature, isn't there, to getting every project done? Like you really always will deliver, and it will be good quality because you don't make crap. But how much time you can dedicate to it and how many tricks you can do along the way is based off of the budget and resources you have to get the project done.
Yeah.
So it's not really a compromise of quality, because a lot of the stuff we deliver is very subjective in the creative field, and you always deliver. How many times have you not delivered, Matt? You deliver
Exactly.
every time, right? Yeah.
Exactly. I think another thing that I'll add to in terms of what the power of the roll-up is, it allows us to overspend if we want to.
You're exactly right. Well, explain that more.
It allows us to overspend if we want to. It's like, we know that this project, we're probably going to take a bath on at the beginning, but we know it's going to be worth it because it's just going to be a lot of fun. But having all those numbers in front of me, I can be like, all right, let's just do it. I know we're going to steal some from the indirect, and that's okay.
That's exactly right. And then when I build my indirect categories, so I have this thing called the factors report. That's what the whole factors method comes from. I even have calculated loss as an expense item in the indirect area. So in a way, the loss is spread out over all projects because I've made it an expense item. I make profit an expense item. So really, you can spend every dollar of the direct money because I've already made profit an expense item in the indirect area. So I'm guaranteed profit because I made that up front, and the producer can spend all of it. Hopefully they spend just a little bit less to gain a little, get a little bit more in your pocket. But there is kind of a wiggle room. The key takeaway from what you're saying, though, is if you're going to overspend, you want to see the negative number still. Where I feel like so many production systems allow you to hide it so that the producer always looks good, but you don't really where the negative is. Like, just have it be negative. Get it out there. Deal with the real problems.
Well, I think too, like the idea of hiding it means you're not an owner who's in touch with what's going on then. Like, what are you hiding it from me for? Why can't I do the math myself and see it? It's like.
Yeah. One more question from Jed is, do the percentages change throughout the year? And I'm guessing that's like, if you're really busy and you have more revenue than you expected to have, you can possibly reallocate direct and indirect. So if you needed $1 million to run your business and you have a $2 million a year business, 50% of it is you needed for your business. But if you got to 3 million, now I only need 30% to run my business. So I could move those percentages around.
Oh, yeah.
So the answer to that is possibly yes. My encouragement would be, move it slowly when you do. And I've, with some clients, strategically moved it where they would always have a slow fall, but a really busy summer. What I would do is I'd actually move the percentages in the summer to capture more cash. So I made it harder in the summer while they were busy. And then in the fall, when it was slow, we had cash captured from the summer, we can move into the fall. So that was a little trick I was doing annually with a client to always kind of cover this seasonal kind of low that they had, opposed to before I got there, what they were doing is laying people off in the fall and then hiring a bunch of people in the spring to make it a busy summer season. And this allowed us to retain those clients. So there is some shifting you can do, kind of like once you got the method down, that you can move things back and forth. But right off the bat, I'd say you kind of just once a year set up your factors, look forward towards that year, and then capture those percentages. If you're underperforming drastically, you're going to have to go back and shift things around because you're not capturing enough in the indirect side. But the key here is, I think, Matt, this is what you figured out, is like you finally have control. So the trick is if you do shift the percentages, you actually will get results, and that's the key. So yeah, you can shift it, and you'll get those results that you want to, and that's super awesome. Where without this, there is no control. You could want more money, but where's it going to come from? There was nothing to take it from. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, but when Joel was talking to you, I think a few weeks ago, and you were just kind of expressing how powerful this has been, he thought, what a great moment for other people to hear and come alongside. It's funny, some of the lists here I see are existing clients that are running these systems. So I think there's a lot of people backing you up, Matt, and kind of know what it's like and are thankful to have some visibility.
Oh yeah, it's huge.
That's really great.
Yep, I love it. Get one if you don't have one.
Yeah, right. I'll say, like, we give these away for free. If you're interested in having a roll-up, we have a simple, we call it roll-up light. You can have it, start using it. I'm happy to walk through the factors with you as well and kind of help people start making those indirect decisions. It's just way too powerful. We want it to get in everyone's hands. And I think in your case, Matt, you're actually doing the CreOS engagement where you have a system that we've built for you and you're running it consistently. And Joel is coaching and consulting you through it. So we also have a level of engagement to help people walk through it. So you're great. I always appreciate when you come on board, and congratulations to you. I'm glad this is really working out.
Yeah, we're pretty happy.
Yeah, it's awesome. I just wanted to get it's so awesome to see the revolution take place inside of a company when someone gets their hands on this. So
yeah,
I'm happy for you.
Yeah, thanks.
Of course. And thank you all for being part of the conversation today. If you want to know more, you can always email me or Joel, tim@revthink.com. You can find this in community too. So we'll put the replay there. Matt's in community. You can ask him more detailed questions. If you really want to believe if he's being paid for this or if it's a true endorsement, you can ask him directly. It's totally cool.
Right.
But awesome. We exist so you can thrive in business, life, and career. So we appreciate being here. And Matt, you have a good week. We'll see you all next week.
See you guys.
Bye.